My name is Emily Carter, and last night at my father's 70th birthday dinner in Boston, he raised his glass, looked me dead in the eye, and announced in front of everyone, "Emily, you will not receive a single dollar of this family's fortune." The room froze. My brothers smirked, my relatives whispered, and my mother's face turned pale. But what my father didn't know, what none of them knew, was that while they were celebrating their empire of concrete and steel, I had quietly built something far greater. An empire of my own, one that would make his announcement not just cruel but utterly irrelevant. And before that night was over, a single sentence from my teenage niece would flip the entire Carter family upside down, forever. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, inside a sprawling brick mansion on Beacon Hill. A house people whispered about, a symbol of old money and power. From the outside we looked like the perfect American dynasty. But on the inside the cracks were there from the beginning. My father, Richard Carter, built Carter Construction from nothing. To him, concrete and steel were not just materials, they were proof of his dominance. And he made sure everyone knew it. My mother, Linda, was the opposite. Soft-spoken, always smoothing over conflicts, never daring to contradict him. Then there were my brothers. Jonathan, the eldest, sharp with numbers, groomed since birth to sit behind my father's desk. Mark, the youngest, charismatic, the perfect salesman who could charm a room with one smile. Both were praised, molded, rewarded. Me. I was the middle child, the daughter who never fit the blueprint. When I asked questions about the company, my father didn't just dismiss me, he laughed. "Business is a man's world, Emily. Find yourself a good husband." That was the foundation of our family dynamic. My brothers destined for the throne and me expected to watch from the sidelines. But what my father never understood was this. When you tell a child she's not enough, when you strip her of every ounce of validation, you don't break her. You build a fire inside her that burns hotter than anything you can imagine. And that fire would one day outgrow the empire my father spent his life building. When it came time for college, I set my sights on MIT. I wanted to study biomedical engineering, technology that could save lives. But when the acceptance letter arrived, my father didn't smile. He scoffed. "MIT? That's nonsense. Jonathan and Mark will get business degrees to carry the company forward. Family money goes to them. You'll figure something else out." Just like that, the door slammed shut. No tuition. No support. No belief. So I did the only thing left. I fought for myself. I deferred admission for a year, juggling 3 jobs. Waitressing in the mornings, stocking shelves in the afternoons, and keeping books for small businesses late at night. Every dollar I earned went into one envelope labeled MIT. There were nights I collapsed on the floor of my tiny apartment, hands blistered from carrying trays, eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets. And yet in those moments I whispered to myself, "You will not break me. I will not be the forgotten Carter." When I finally stepped onto the campus of MIT the following fall, I wasn't just a student. I was a survivor with something to prove. But the world didn't go easy on me. While my brothers enjoyed cushy internships handed to them through my father's connections, I was pulling all-nighters in the lab, coding algorithms on borrowed laptops, and surviving on 4 hours of sleep. And then, the first turning point. In my junior year, I joined a research project that used artificial intelligence to detect early signs of cancer. One night, our prototype correctly identified a tumor that even top specialists had missed. The room went silent. My heart racing. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about proving my father wrong anymore. This was about saving lives, and building an empire he could never control. Years passed and the grind began to pay off. After graduation, I joined a small Boston startup. The pay was scraps, but the experience was gold. When the company was acquired 2 years later, I had just enough savings, and just enough courage, to launch my own. It wasn't glamorous. My so-called office was a cramped basement apartment. My team? 3 other dreamers working on fold-out tables. But together we built the foundation of what would become MedTech AI, a platform designed to help hospitals detect rare diseases. We pitched, we begged, we heard no more times than I could count. But then came the breakthrough. Our algorithm flagged a rare condition in a young boy, a condition even the best specialists had missed. The hospital called it a miracle. I called it proof. We closed our first funding round within months. For the first time in my life, I felt unstoppable. And yet, back in Boston, nothing had changed. My father still sent Christmas cards without my name. My brothers still paraded their promotions at Carter Construction. To them I was a ghost. Until one winter I decided to return home, for the first time in nearly a decade. I'll never forget the moment I stepped into that mansion again. The same chandelier hanging in the foyer. The same smell of cigar smoke from my father's study. The same cold stare from him as I entered. "Emily," he said flatly, like announcing a weather report. Jonathan smirked, swirling his glass of scotch. "Still playing entrepreneur in California?" Mark chuckled, adding, "Dad says there's always a spot for you in accounting, if you're ready to stop pretending." My blood boiled, but I forced a smile. "Actually," I said, locking eyes with my father, "we just closed a $15 million Series A round. Investors think medtech AI is the future of healthcare." The room went quiet for a beat. Then my father scoffed, the same dismissive laugh I'd heard all my life. "Series A? That's not a business, Emily. That's smoke and mirrors. Real businesses pour concrete. Real businesses leave legacies." Jonathan laughed with him. Mark shook his head. My mother looked down, silent as always. That night I packed my bag and left before sunrise. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. Because deep down I knew, one day they would regret every word. And I would not need their approval to build the empire they never believed I could. After that disastrous visit home, I made a promise to myself. I will never beg for their approval again. The next few years were brutal but transformative. MedTech AI grew from a basement startup into a force no one could ignore. We secured contracts with hospitals across the country. Our platform wasn't just theory anymore. It was saving lives in real time. Investors poured in. Partnerships multiplied. Awards followed. Each headline carried my name, but back in Boston the Carter family never asked, never cared. To them, I was still the daughter who had chosen the wrong path. And maybe I wanted it that way. Because while my father sat on his throne of steel and concrete, I was building something invisible, untouchable. Year by year, milestone by milestone, I climbed higher. 1 million patients diagnosed through our system. 5,000 hospitals on board globally. Series C funding at a $2.5 billion valuation. And then, the acquisition. A tech giant swooped in, finalizing a deal that combined cash and stock worth more than $4.5 billion. Overnight, I became one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in America. But here's the twist. I didn't change a thing. No flashy cars, no penthouse parties, no press tours. I drove a modest car, wore off-the-rack clothes, and kept my empire quiet. Because I wanted to prove something. That real power isn't about showing off. It's about knowing the truth while everyone else underestimates you. So while my brothers Jonathan and Mark boasted about new skyscrapers and multi-million-dollar contracts at Carter Construction, I sent polite Christmas cards and let them believe I was still scraping by in California. Little did they know that the sister they dismissed as playing entrepreneur had already surpassed their empire 100 times over. And all it would take was one family dinner, one careless announcement, for the truth to detonate in the middle of their perfect little dynasty. The night of my father's 70th birthday was everything you'd expect from a Carter celebration. Crystal chandeliers glowing over polished mahogany. Waiters gliding through the room with silver trays. My brothers Jonathan and Mark boasting in every corner, their wives glowing in designer gowns. And then, me. I arrived alone in a rented sedan, dressed in a plain black dress. No one knew the watch on my wrist cost more than Jonathan's entire car. No one suspected the woman they dismissed as the family disappointment had quietly outbuilt them all. The evening rolled on with wine, laughter, and endless stories of Carter Construction's great achievements. My name was barely mentioned. I didn't mind. I was waiting. Finally, after dinner, my father rose to speak. The clinking of his spoon against the glass silenced the room. He stood tall, voice booming with that same authority that had ruled my childhood. 70 years. He began, and I have built a company that stands as my legacy. Tonight I make official what many of you already know. It is time to pass the torch. Jonathan straightened his tie, Mark flashed a grin. They knew what was coming. Jonathan will take over as CEO. Mark will serve as president. Together they will carry Carter Construction into the future. Applause erupted. Glasses raised. My brothers beamed. Then his eyes locked onto me. The room grew still. As for Emily, he paused, letting the silence slice through me like a knife. She chose her own path. She walked away from this family, from this business. And so, she will not be included in the inheritance. Gasps. A few awkward coughs. My mother's hand trembled as she gripped her napkin. Jonathan smirked. Mark looked down, hiding a grin. Me. I simply picked up my fork, sliced through a piece of cake and took a bite. Calm, steady, silent. Because while my father thought he was humiliating me, he had no idea that within minutes, the truth would explode and rewrite everything he thought he knew about his unworthy daughter. The room was still humming with congratulations for my brothers when it happened. At the far end of the table, my 14-year-old niece Olivia had been half listening, half scrolling on her iPad. Suddenly she gasped so loud the entire dining room froze. "Grandpa, Aunt Emily is on Forbes," she blurted out, eyes wide, voice cracking with disbelief. Every head turned. Forks clattered against plates. My father's face stiffened. Jonathan chuckled dismissively. "Olivia, you must be mistaken. Probably some other Emily Carter." But Olivia shook her head violently, holding the screen up like evidence in a courtroom. "No, it's her. Her picture is right here. It says she's worth $4.5 billion. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Mark's glass slipped from his fingers, wine spilling across the tablecloth. Jonathan's smirk dissolved, his face draining of color. And my father, Richard Carter, the man who had spent a lifetime towering over me, reached out a trembling hand for the iPad. He studied the screen, eyes narrowing, lips parting in shock. Finally, he read the words aloud, almost choking on them. Emily Carter, founder of MedTech AI, net worth $4.50 billion. His hand dropped to his side. His gaze shot back to me, searching, disbelieving, desperate. "Is this true?" he demanded, voice unsteady. I set my fork down, folded my hands neatly on the table and met his eyes without blinking. "Yes, father," I said calmly, every word slicing through the silence. "It's true." The room erupted. Voices overlapping, shouts, questions, gasps. "For billion? How? All this time?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply sat there, steady, composed, as the truth I had carried in silence detonated in the heart of the Carter dynasty. And for the first time in my life, my father wasn't looking down at me. He was staring up at someone he never imagined I could become. The dining room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped so fast it was impossible to separate them. "For billion?" Uncle James shouted, nearly spilling his whiskey. "Is she serious?" Aunt Martha whispered, clutching her pearls. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" My mother gasped, her voice trembling between pride and confusion. Jonathan slammed his glass on the table, jaw clenched. "This is ridiculous. There must be some mistake. Emily doesn't, she couldn't." Mark cut him off, his tone sharp. "It's right there in black and white, Jonathan. Forbes doesn't just make typos." I said nothing. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded, watching the storm I had known would come. My father, Richard Carter, was stone silent. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger, or perhaps the daughter he had buried under his own arrogance. His hand gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles whitened. Jonathan turned his anger on me. "So all this time while we thought you were scraping by in California, you were, what? Laughing at us behind our backs." I met his glare evenly. "No, Jonathan. I was surviving. Building. Working while you mocked me. I didn't need you to believe in me. I needed to believe in myself." My words cut through the noise like a blade. The room fell momentarily quiet. Then my mother spoke, her eyes brimming with tears. "Emily, why didn't you tell us? Why keep this hidden?" I softened just slightly. "Because I wanted to be seen for who I am, not for what I've earned. I wanted to know if family love was unconditional, or if it came with a price tag." The air thickened. My father's chest rose and fell, his silence heavier than any words. Mark leaned forward, voice quieter now, but laced with something between admiration and guilt. "Emily, you built all of this? By yourself?" "Not by myself," I corrected calmly. "With a team. With people who believed in me when my own family didn't." The truth hung in the air, impossible to deny, impossible to escape. And in that moment, as my relatives stared at me, some in awe, some in envy, some in shame, I realized something powerful. The empire I had built wasn't just mine. It was the proof that their definition of success had been wrong all along. And now, they would have to live with that truth. The party buzz faded into background noise when my father pushed back his chair and stood. "Emily," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Come with me." Every eye followed us as he led me down the hallway to his private study, the same room I had been summoned to as a child whenever I had disappointed him. The heavy oak door closed with a thud, cutting us off from the chaos of the dining room. The silence was suffocating. His study looked exactly the same, dark mahogany shelves lined with business books, cigar smoke lingering in the air, a massive desk that always made me feel small. But this time I didn't feel small. He stayed standing behind the desk, hands pressed against the wood. His eyes, usually sharp and unyielding, flickered with something I had never seen before: doubt. "Is it true?" he asked finally, his voice rough. "4.5 billion? You built that company." I met his stare without flinching. His father. Every sleepless night. Every rejection. Every time you told me I wasn't enough, I built it anyway. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his gray hair. For the first time Richard Carter looked old. "I wanted to protect you," he muttered almost to himself. "The business world chews people up. I didn't want you to fail." I stepped closer, my voice steady but edged with fire. "You didn't protect me. You dismissed me. You didn't shield me from failure. You denied me the chance to prove myself. And yet, I still did." His jaw tightened. He tried to hold his authority, but the weight of my words pressed down on him. "Do you have any idea what it was like," I continued, "watching you pour everything into my brothers while you laughed at me? Do you know how it feels to be invisible in your own family?" The silence after that was deafening. For once my father had no immediate answer. He lowered himself into his chair, the leather groaning beneath him. His voice cracked slightly as he spoke. "I underestimated you. Worse, I never truly saw you." I felt a strange mix of anger and relief surge through me. It wasn't a full apology, not yet, but it was the first crack in the fortress he had built around his pride. I leaned in, my voice quiet but piercing. "All I ever wanted wasn't your money. It was your respect. And for once I need you to admit, to yourself if not to me, that you were wrong." His eyes fell to the desk, his shoulders heavy with decades of arrogance collapsing all at once. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, Richard Carter looked smaller than me. When I stepped back into the dining room, every conversation stopped. All eyes followed me like I had returned from another world. My father remained in his study, leaving the family to face me without his shadow looming over them. The first to move was my mother. Her hands trembled as she clutched her napkin, eyes glistening with tears. She crossed the room quickly, pulling me into an embrace so tight it nearly broke me. "Emily," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I should have defended you years ago. When your father dismissed your dreams, when your brothers mocked you, I stayed silent. I thought keeping peace was better than fighting back. But all it did was let you suffer alone. I am so sorry." For a moment, the years of her quiet compliance fell away. I saw her guilt raw and real. I squeezed her hands gently. "I hear you now, Mom. And that's enough." But Jonathan wasn't moved. He stood rigid near the fireplace, anger flickering in his eyes. "So this is it, huh? The big reveal. You sit there like a queen while the rest of us look like fools. Do you have any idea what it's like to bust your back for Dad's approval, only to find out my little sister has been sitting on billions?" His voice cracked, half rage, half envy. I held his stare. "Jonathan, I didn't build this to humiliate you. I built it because no one believed I could. Not even you. Especially not you." He turned away, jaw tight, hiding the storm inside him. The resentment was real, but behind it, so was a hint of shame. Then Mark spoke. His usual smooth charm was gone. His voice was low, hesitant. "Emily, I laughed at you because I didn't understand you. I thought following Dad was the only way to succeed. But you proved there's another way. Better way. I should have respected that." He paused, then added softly, "I'm sorry, sis." The room fell quiet again. For the first time in decades, my family wasn't united in mocking me or ignoring me. They were fractured, vulnerable, forced to confront truths they'd buried under years of tradition and pride. And standing there, I realized something. Wealth had shifted the power dynamic, yes, But what truly cracked their walls was the undeniable fact that I had built meaning out of nothing. I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I was the mirror they couldn't look away from. As the tension in the room lingered, a small voice broke the silence. It was Olivia, still clutching her iPad, her cheeks flushed. She stepped toward me, eyes wide with admiration instead of judgment. "Aunt Emily, will you teach me?" she asked softly. "Not about money, about how you did it. How you didn't give up even when everyone told you to." Her words sliced through the bitterness like sunlight breaking storm clouds. Before I could answer, my nephew Ethan, 16, usually glued to his phone, stood up. His voice cracked, but his determination was clear. "I've been learning to code, secretly. I didn't tell Dad because I knew he'd laugh. But I want to build things too. Can you maybe show me?" My chest tightened. For years I had carried the weight of being unseen. And now here were the next Carters standing in front of me, choosing a different path. I knelt down so I could meet their eyes. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'll teach you both. I'll help you find your own way, your own fire. Because your worth isn't in a company name or an inheritance. It's in what you create for yourself." Olivia smiled through tears. Ethan's eyes lit up for the first time all evening. Even Emma, Mark's quiet daughter, spoke up from the corner. "I've been doing online coding tutorials, but I get stuck a lot. Could you help me too?" I laughed softly, tears prickling my own eyes now. "Of course, Emma. You're all capable of more than this house ever let you believe." Around the table I noticed heads turning, some in shock, some in awe. The youngest generation of Carters wasn't asking my brothers for lessons in construction contracts or real estate deals. They were looking to me, for guidance, for hope, for permission to dream differently. And for the first time in that house I felt not just powerful, but purposeful. This was no longer about revenge or even validation. This was about rewriting what it meant to be a Carter. "I want to tell you something, face to face. For years I thought my value would come from my father's approval, or from fitting into the mold my family carved out for me. I was wrong. True worth doesn't come from an inheritance, a title, or even billions of dollars. It comes from refusing to let anyone else define who you are." I know some of you watching have been dismissed. Maybe by your parents, maybe by a teacher, maybe even by people you thought would always be in your corner. It hurts. It cuts deeper than you want to admit. But listen to me. You are not the limits other people put on you. If my story proves anything, it's this. Your path might not look like theirs, but that doesn't make it less valuable. Sometimes the greatest inheritance you can ever give yourself is the courage to build your own future. So don't wait for permission. Don't wait for validation. Start, fail, learn, build. Because the world doesn't need another copy of someone else's legacy. It needs what only you can create. And one more thing. Don't close the door on family forever, even when they hurt you. People can change. I saw it with my father, my brothers, even my mother. Healing isn't easy, but it's possible. So if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you weren't enough, let this be your reminder. You are enough. You always were. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever had to prove yourself to the people who doubted you? Because your story matters too.